I'd like to introduce Chef Jeremy Poten. He is from Johnson, Wales in Miami, and got his education at Johnson, Wales in Providence. And he's going to speak to you a lot about his newest endeavors and professional development. But I just wanted to highlight that just this year he was for the Club Advisor of the Year Award for the Molecular Gastronomy Club. So that's really exciting. I'd like to turn it over to the chef and enjoy the presentation.
Thank you very much. So that just means I'm a big geek, I guess. So, not really, actually. And it's funny because why I guess you guys are here and the molecular gastronomy has that title and Sous Vide and all of this. And I think the big thing that I hope that you get from this today is that our students are coming to us with verbiage from the internet, from Top Chef on, oh, chef, I went out and bought, calcium lactate. What can I do with it? Well, I don't know. What do you want to do with it? And so this goes back to my presentations and how I became this type of a educator with the science side of it. I sat through 3 one-week seminars with Chris Young, and if you don't know who Chris Young is, today we're going to watch a couple of video clips from his website. He is from Duck. He was a sous chef there and wrote the cuisine books, and part of them. And he did a training over a course of 3 years with Johnson & Wales. So I sat through to learn how to deliver this material to students. So when they asked us to do a topic for the conference, this was one that I thought would be important because I sat through it from where you stand or sat or sit and said, how can I educate them? So today's seminar is not about here's sous vide, this is how we're going to cook, this is what we're going to cook, and this is why. And I think this is more important than anybody can follow a recipe and everybody's like, oh, sous vide, just put it in a bag and put it in boiling water. Not even close to what it is. But students all come to you and think that's what it is. And it doesn't matter what temperature, it doesn't matter how long and all that sort of stuff. And as us as educators, we have to educate them. So today I have some slides. All of these are going to be on the cafe website. Mary Peterson's going to put them up next week, so you don't have to worry about copying them or anything like that. She'll have access to everyone. You'll have access to all of these. There is 2 little videos that we're going to watch from YouTube, from Chef Steps, and then there's one link to some myths about sous vide cooking. So the first thing to kind of talk about is what it means. Under vacuum is actually the literal translation of what sous vide refers to. The purpose of that is to isolate it from air. We've been doing this for hundreds of years. Obviously, we didn't call it sous vide. Sous vide really got its practice, you'll see down here, with deli meats. Deli meats in the 40s was the first industry to really vacuum pack products. It was never really meant to cook in. It was meant to preserve, reduce the oxygen. We're going to spend a little bit of time about talking about that reduced oxygen, because the biggest thing you're going to get from whatever state you might be from, a lot of times you might say it's not legal in our state to cook sous vide. And it's not, oh, we can't do it because of the reduced oxygen environment that we're going to keep it in. But if you look back at all of it, and we're going to talk about some myths, we're not here to change the health code. We can't do that. We would love to kind of do that. But I think that's one of the biggest things. Up here, what is sous vide in kitchens today? It's all about temperature and temperature control. And there's a lot of different takes on sous vide. Some people are big fans of it. I know chefs that love it. I cook with it. I do it all the time. I know chefs who are opposed to it 100% and won't go into their kitchens. They won't teach it. They won't talk about it because of the pathogen process that will multiply in a bag if you're not careful. And I'm just going to give you my 2 cents on that, is that with whatever we cook as chefs, you have that potential. Whether you're putting something in a marinade in a refrigerator and you don't properly cover it with a marinade, so on and so on. We can keep going, but no matter how we cook, we always take that risk. And with this is education. If I know what I'm supposed to do for sous vide to make sure that the food is cooked properly, I won't have a problem in my mind. Now, have I cooked something before and it turned out bad? Yes. Ribs one time. Now, my science side of me says it wasn't my fault, it was actually the ribs' fault, because, and you're all probably laughing, but at our school we process a lot of our own meat. And I think the meat that I had gotten, a small part of it was bad. And I think because I put it in the bag, cooked it for 3 days, it just was bad. It wasn't unhealthy to eat, it just smelled off. Now, did I eat it and chance it? No, of course not, I threw it away. But that was the only time. I probably sous vide over 150 different items, from eggs to duck breast to whatever, and that was one time out of that. So then I go back to my cooking experience throughout life. Have I ever cooked something that turned out bad? More than once, and lots of times. So when you're balancing it out, it's the same. So why should we use it? And this is going to be one, again, I want to show a lot of videos, but how many people here know steps? Okay, 3. So one of the things, and I'm not here to plug them, but I'm a very big fan of Chef Steps because they explain everything. And it's a website. It's free to join. They have paid classes that you can take, but I would say more than half of their website is free if you sign up. And this is Chris Young's website. He's the chef that I did my training from. And he is obviously a very big fan. And this is just a little video clip, why sous vide. So it's only like 3 minutes.
One measure of culinary skill is consistency. In a professional kitchen, it's often said that you're only as good as your last service. But even when cooking at home, given the effort spent preparing a meal, it's satisfying when it comes out just as good as the last time. Because sous vide affords precise temperature control, results can be repeated with ease. No amount of culinary skill or judgment can match the consistency of sous vide cooking. With traditional cooking techniques, temperature control is tricky, so we use adjectives like rare, medium, medium well, and so on to express our preference. Such words are ambiguous, but being more specific is pointless since these cooking techniques don't afford enough control over the temperature to do better. Sous vide makes it possible to be very specific about the degree of doneness that you prefer. For a steak, you might prefer 127, 133, 136 degrees Fahrenheit, or perhaps some other temperature. The point is that you can be certain of achieving your perfect temperature every time. In a professional kitchen, it's remarkable how far this goes towards making service smooth. But even at home, it's great when the food is cooked exactly the way you want. Cooking food at the temperature you've selected and waiting until the center of the food reaches equilibrium with that temperature avoids another common source of inconsistency: having the food overcook after you've stopped the cooking. This happens because with other cooking techniques, the surface of the food is nearly always much hotter than the core temperature, and thus it's critical to time things correctly and allow for the inevitable cooling of the surface and increasing temperature at the center. This, by the way, is why the rib roast that was at your perfect temperature when you pulled it from the oven is overcooked after it has rested for several minutes before you slice into it. But with sous vide, when you remove the food from the bath, its surface and core temperature are already at equilibrium, so it doesn't continue to cook. Consistency comes in other forms too. Portion size, product quality, healthfulness, and food hygiene, all important whether you're cooking in a busy restaurant or at home for your family and friends. Achieving this kind of consistency is one reason we prefer to work with scales. Lamb chops, for example, can be packaged with measured amounts of herbs and spices before they're sealed. This ensures accurate portion control as well as consistent results. In the professional kitchen, this is invaluable. Of course, there's no reason you have to work with this kind of precision. Very often we work ad hoc too and just add what seems about right. Creative inspiration is a big part of cooking, and sometimes you just have to do what feels right.
So when we cook in sous vide, and again, the two terms are not the same. Under vacuum just means us cryovacuuming or sealing it. So a lot of times I'm going to jump around a little bit, but you also saw them use a Ziploc bag. You can use a Ziploc bag. It is temperatured to be about 170 degrees Fahrenheit for you to put into a sous vide bath. So the chemical composition of a Ziploc bag does not have any BPA or anything like that to transfer into the food. So a Ziploc bag is a viable substitute if you don't have a cryovac machine. Now this is probably going to be where your head's thinking, well, how do you get all the air out of a cryovac or a Ziploc bag? In research, it's just kind of funny. One of them said you're supposed to stick a straw in and suck out all the air. I thought that was kind of odd myself because I wouldn't be doing that. But what you do is you put it in the Ziploc bag and you submerge it in just cold water all the way up to the line where the Ziploc is. And when you submerge it in the cold water, all of the oxygen gets forced out of it, out of the Ziploc bag, and then you seal it almost in the water. So is it reduced oxygen environment? Yes. Did you get almost out of it, all the oxygen out of there? Yes. But there's a caveat, which we'll get to in a little bit. The expert in our, go ahead.
Is there a difference between regular Ziploc bag and freezer bags?
Nope. Same. I don't know if they're the exact same as far as composition, but you can use both for sous vide. So up here I put a quote up here by Heston Blumenthal about sous vide cooking, but also I wanted to talk about Dr. Bruno Gasalt. He is pretty much the founder of sous vide. He's the one who started the cooking of it. So again, when a student says sous vide, I want to cook sous vide under vacuum, again, we use what's called an immersion circulator. All right, that's up here. I have one that we use at the university. Now there are a lot of them out there. This is an expensive one. This is about $600 or $700 for this unit here, which is back here in the picture. That's what it looks like here. I'm going to refer to why that picture is actually bad a little bit later on, but most of you probably can guess why. So, well, it's a good picture to have, but you would never cook that way because that's way too much. But that's at the end. So if you're sitting there wondering why that. But he's a gentleman that started it, and he cooked a roast beef in 1971. He works with a company, and there's a source on here, and I'm going to click on it because he has some myths about sous vide that he's done. He has trained a lot of the chefs that work at Alenia, the Fat Duck, Per Se. A lot of Thomas Keller and Grant, all those people have sent their chefs to work with him. He claims he is not a chef, he is a scientist. That's why his name is doctor, not a chef. So he is the person that helps train what we now know for sous vide cooking. The big thing up here, as far as teaching it, has to do with HACCP. And that is the biggest thing that when you leave here today, I'm not here to give you a HACCP lesson because you've all done this, but I'm going to explain to you why this is important. The Board of Health, pretty much in any state, goes by one page. We all know. When the Board of Health comes in and they do an inspection, they want to see that your chicken's cooked to what temperature? 165 for 15 seconds. The people that come in aren't educated. And the way Chef Young explained it to us, which was enlightening to me, as he is way more of a geek than I am, is that they're going off of one page. And if you spend time, which he has, which I can say I haven't, researching the health code, it's all about time and temperature. And that's why I put that up here. I am not saying you should go out and experiment. That's not what I mean by this. But when you do the research, if I cook chicken for 15 seconds to 165, it kills all salmonella. But if I lower the temperature but increase the time, it's a process called pasteurizing. So now what we can do is, hypothetically, cook chicken at 145 degrees, which I've ate before. Now you're probably saying, what does it taste like? It does not taste like chicken, believe it or not. It's a different texture. But is that they pasteurized it for us. Grant and Chef Young, the two people on his team, cooked it for 4 hours at 145 degrees in sous vide, which is enough time to pasteurize it. Different texture, different taste. Again, you say, well, this is the hazard I think we as educators have, because a student's going to come in and say, oh, well, I saw online, as we all know it's all factual, right, that you can cook chicken to 145 safely and eat it. Well, there's a lot of caveats that go with that type of mentality, and we're going to get into that. But this is the code here about following a specific diagram if you're going to choose sous vide cooking. So if I am going to cook something for longer than 4 hours, and that's kind of the caveat with cooking sous vide. We all know we have 4 hours to take it from 41 degrees or 135 before we either have to cool it, serve it, or throw it away. That's HACCP standards. So if I want to take a steak and cook it to 125 degrees, which is below the temperature danger zone, I can. I just have to do it in 4 hours. So that's the big hiccup. That's where we don't have a problem as long as you document it. So when we see the steaks and the video up there, and the way it was, again, explained to me and I tell students, it's precision. What I mean is when I put a steak in for 125 degrees Fahrenheit in the water bath, the core temperature of that steak is 125. The outside of that steak is 125. The water bath's 125. It's never gone above it. It has been below it because it had to go in at some temperature to reach that. So I can't overcook it, and it is a different consistency. To me, it's perfect. And you have to sear it, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But what we're going to do, and up here you'll see where I put reduced oxygen packaging. That's the big issue that HACCP has with us doing sous vide, is because we've reduced it, you might think that's a good thing. But what we've also done potentially is trap in any pathogens, botulism, listeria, something like that, in the packaging. And because I'm cooking it at 125, it's not killing it. But again, if I serve it within 4 hours, I'm fine. So then you say, well, what about, for example, and this is the example I've done for you all, pastrami. The pastrami that I've done probably 6 different times, their recipe from Chef Steps, and by far it's the best pastrami I've ever had. So because I do it, me, Grant, the team, we created from their website a flow chart of what we need from HACCP if they came in and saw that I was cooking ribs for 2 days. All right, because it actually takes 9 days to cook the ribs for the short rib. For the pastrami, doing it their method. So what we have is we're going to watch a video, and this is a pastrami here. And I just want to show you the video in the process of sous vide. There is a little bit at the beginning, which I'm going to fast forward through, of the process of brining it, which takes us a week and all that sort of stuff. But I'm going to show you putting it in a bag. And why this is important is because the next slides, I've outlined exactly a HACCP plan with the critical control points that we would have to create if somebody came in, the Board of Health, and said, I need to see your HACCP plan for your pastrami. And you have it now, or you'll have it now when you get it from the website. And here's a flow chart of exactly how it comes in with the critical control points for each of them. Over here outlines the significant hazards, how we're going to monitor it, everything the Board of Health wants. So they're going to smile and be happy and say, you're covered, you're good, all right? And I created a blank one here for you as well, so that you guys can start having those as well. Now again, this is only if it's going over that 4-hour period. If it's under that 4-hour period, all you have to do is have a logbook of when you submerged the product, at what temperature it was starting, and then within 4 hours, serve it, chill it, or throw it away. So we'll watch the quick video, and this shows the sous vide process here. Probably a commercial. But this website's good because they explain everything. They give the formulas for everything. And I think as this is going, I can talk for 15 more seconds. One of the things also with modern food is the precision of what we have to do. Everything is weighed to the gram. And culinary students, as you know, have a very, oh, that's close enough. Oh, it looks like that. Or, oh, just throw a handful in. It can't be that way with this cooking. And that's what he kind of elaborated on at the beginning, is that this is precision, so that you have consistency every time. This pastrami that you see here, every time we make it, because it is to the gram, is always identical. And it's hard to get us as chefs, because you all know when we cook a dish, somebody will come up and kind of get that recipe, and you're like, well, you just kind of, put a little of this and put a little of that, and I really didn't, measure it. But this gives precision. But also, the hard part students have with this is that they try to be creative and change things. And so much of modern cuisine is science. They use specific, for example, they do beetroot spherification on here. And students will come in and they'll say, well, instead of beet juice, I want to use apple juice. Well, there's a different pH. All right, there's different sugar, there's different all this. So their formula doesn't work, and they get all upset, and they're like, well, why didn't it work? Well, you have a different product. You just can't take one recipe and substitute it with something else, So this is the part, and again, this is Grant. I'm probably going to give Grant a plug better than Chef Young, but this is Grant here. He's probably the smartest man on food I've ever met in my entire life. He's unbelievable. But, so this is a brine. It takes about a week. And they use a short rib plate to do their pastrami from, as do I. Like I said, I follow this formula. But the sous vide, here, there's a couple of things that you'll see that they've changed. Sometimes they also calculate the temperatures by sticking a probe into the poly bag that they've submerged in the water, which is, again, you're ensuring the temperature so that if you're testing it and so on. The only thing that you have to do is you have to go to Home Depot or Lowe's and buy the waterproof tape that's double-sided. And you put it on the poly bag and then you slide the probe through it. So that way it doesn't puncture a hole in the poly bag and then air or water, seep in or out. Now, if you're trying this and you don't have a cryovac machine, you could just cut the ribs down into individual ones and then sous vide them. And then put them in a gallon-sized poly bag. But in showing students this website, you notice every step's here, and then when you go to the website, the formula is there for anybody to go ahead and download and to use. So here's, again, the reduced oxygen environment. You're putting it into the sous vide machine bath here. So again, this is technically the sous vide here in vacuum, all right? This is just an immersion circulator. A lot of times this gets now called the sous vide machine, but it's an immersion circulator. So again, and this is where I'm going to talk about why we do this. Because this product was cooked at 145 degrees for 2 days, your meat isn't subjected to such high extremes like a grill or a roast or an oven that's heating it up to 400 or 500 degrees. So when you look at how it falls apart literally by your hand, that has to do with that we haven't dramatically changed the consistency of the meat by the process of grilling it or searing it or anything like that. So it's an understatement to say it's kind of tasty. So, oh, many times. I did not, and they're talking about doing a leadership one at Johnson & Wales in the next year or two. So I'll do that for that because it's by far I can't even compare it. Like literally, this plate here. We walk probably 4 different times for groups of people, and yeah, it's pretty amazing. So if you ever have a chance, it does take a week. But it is well worth it. And it's actually not as much work as you might think it is. And in one of the videos, I don't know if I show or what I've researched, it talks about how us as chefs have to use so many pans and cook so many different things. And here you just throw it all in a bag. And it really is that simple until you master what you want. But there's tips coming up. So up here, you'll notice this is all the critical limits. And again, I'm not going to bore you with HACCP because I'm sure you've all sat through all different types of, whether it's through the National Restaurant Association, the Serve Safe, or whatever it might be. So you have this here, but it's a great starting point for you to look and say, and you say, well, is it worth it? Is it worth it to do all of this? The consistency factor of sous vide, to me, can't be touched by anything else. So I think I started about this, but I got sidetracked. So if I was a steakhouse and I was going to create a restaurant today, I would have 5 sous vide baths going at all times once service started. One for rare, medium, medium well, and well done. And what it does, he orders a steak rare. I take the bag out. I would cut it open. I would sear it then. We're going to talk about searing before or after in a second. Put it on a plate, and within 2 minutes, I can have it on his table, serving it to him. It takes out any air, because there's no way that steak can overcook. There's no way that steak can undercook. It is what it is because the water bath never heats up higher than that. And I remember in my education them talking about when you put a chicken in an oven and how an oven works. We all know that when you put on a convection oven and you turn it on, the temperature goes to 500-600 degrees to heat up the whole oven. So your outside of your chicken, just like you did with the example of the roast, the outside of your chicken is bombarded with heat of up to 600 degrees. When it reaches 350, your oven shuts off. Then it cools down, then it turns back on again. 600 degrees to rapidly increase the temperature of the oven as fast as it can back to 350. So the outside of that chicken is constantly getting hit by really intense temperatures, And the inside slowly heats up, and that's how we roast. With sous vide, when we put it in that bath and we start at 41 degrees, we bring it up. And I use the analogy of why we cook potatoes in cold water to start. You know, you bring up the core temperature of the potato with the water molecules in the potato to bring it all up at the same time. That way the outside of the potato doesn't cook faster than the inside. It's the same concept of what we do with sous vide. So you have all of these. So some tools that can help. And I've put on here, you do have to pay for this app, but I found it extremely useful. This is an app by PolyScience. I think it was $5 for the app. And in the app, and it's probably hard for you to see, but when you download this and you have your own copy, I would program into this right here everything that I need to cook the size, the weight, whether it's chicken, whether it's steak, whatever it might be. And here it gives you a precise chart of how long it takes and all the time that it takes to make it pasteurized if you're going for that, or you're just cooking it so that the outside of it is cooked, but the internal core is less than, HACCP standards and so on, and it gives you an entire log, and it tells you how to cook it. So this is the PolyScience app. And again, they're more expensive. There are cheaper, the free apps as well, but this one has by far the most credible information that we can use as far as producing any of our sous vide techniques. So those are all just taken from my phone screenshots so that you can see all the different steps. Now, here's the caveat I talked about before about the 4-hour, okay? And this is from the FDA code so that we fall into compliance with that. And then this is the other big one that you will want to make sure that you put. Anytime I cook sous vide for a dinner for chefs or anybody outside the university or wherever it might be, you might have all seen this catchphrase before on menus nowadays, all right? You put that on there, that is, I don't want to say that's your fall-proof window that you're never going to get sued or no one's going to get sick, but you're now telling the customer, if you order this, you might be getting it cooked under or raw or what, not with sous vide, but with shellfish or, with any of that sort of thing. So you increase that risk. So we have it here. Here's the this is a website, cuisinesolutions.com. This is one that Dr. Gasalt is working with, has been working with. And these are all, again, on here for you guys to look at. But these are some myths about sous vide. And I think it's all about education. And I think it is about people sitting through here and hearing it. It's going to take some time to change some people who are stuck on those beliefs that, oh, it's not safe. Oh, what happens if? What happens if? What happens if? Well, you could say the same thing with us cooking, boiled egg for crying out loud if we don't do it long enough. So the first one here is, and let me explain the science and why this is a bad picture. Here, you need the water to circulate. The object of an immersion circulator is that this is set to 56 degrees Celsius. The water over here should be 56 degrees Celsius. If you put too much in the bath, the water isn't circulating through it. So I don't think a Board of Health person yet would probably be that apt to see that and to know that. We would have to know that as culinarians. The next little tip, which is later on, are the paper clips. This is a really good way so you don't have to stick your hand into the hot water to take it out. By using these metal clips on the side, making sure that the entire product is submerged, the water can go on this side of it next to the Lexan and continue to go around it. What ends up happening is if you put a lot of products in, the weight of them touches together and the water doesn't circulate through it. So the temperature between two sous vide products might be 10, 15 degrees cooler than what the water bath is. So by putting the clips on the side, the water circulates around it. So this was a funny quote that he has on the website as well. So, and I think a lot of it's there. And I'm not sure if you can read it, so I'll just read the myths. Slow cooking meat at low temperatures allow bacteria to multiply to a high dangerous rate. Even though it's true, vacuum sealing sous vide does pasteurization. So it's actually safer if you cook it for a longer period of time. So that's a myth. Now, that is the big why you have to know the Board of Health and what they require and have a HACCP plan. Number 2, sous vide takes the sensation out of creativity and creativity out of a food product. That's another false thing, all right? Yes, you don't get as much, like, let's say, fond in a pan to make a pan sauce and all this sort of stuff. Can you make the sauce from any of the juices that come out of it? Absolutely. And you should. But we're only limited by our lack of experience with sous vide cooking. Meaning, you can be as creative as you want. You could sear ahead of time, after, all those different things. What can you sous? I mean, I did one hollandaise sauce in a sous vide machine. You're like, what? I know. You're like, no, can't be done. Believe it or not. So you take the eggs, you take the clarified egg yolks, the clarified butter, wine, you put it in a Ziploc bag, and you put it in a sous vide machine for a period of time. And then you put it in an ISI, one of the whipped cream dispensers, and you put it, charge it with CO2, and you put it in the water bath, and the hollandaise sauce will last in there probably 2 to 3 hours before it's bad. And every time you use the whipped cream dispenser, it comes out 1,000% perfect. I've never messed it up. Eggs Benedict, anything you want to put a hollandaise sauce on, it's perfect. And again, it goes with that science of, I teach with some traditional chefs that have been around for a while. And, I'd be like, here, you should see this hollandaise sauce. Why is it in that? Well, because I'm, changing it. See, I'm good. I'm not going to try it. That's all right. I'm all set, And you kind of laugh inside, and it's okay, because I get it. And a lot of times, students have to understand where this food comes from. Does that mean we're going to take it out of our curriculum at Johnson? No. We're still going to show them the traditional way of making it. But here's an alternative. And students who go out to work in restaurants, especially in Miami, they make it that way. It's not like we're not, we're teaching something from the science that's 10 years down the road. They're doing it in restaurants in Miami now. This is what they're already doing. So, myth number 3, cooking within the plastic pouch doesn't produce enough liquid for a sauce. True and false. True, because I am not exposing it to such high temperatures where the juice is now being extracted. We all know that the meat that we cook, the juice circulates because of the higher temperature. So if I'm cooking at a lower temperature, less juice comes out of the product. Well, where do you want the juice anyway? In the meat. So when we cook it in the meat, and it stays there because it hasn't been exposed to such high temperatures, do you even need a au jus or something on the plate? You're putting that so that it has sauce to go with the meat. So, and there is some juice that comes out of it. And I'm jumping around, but one of the tips, just be careful with salt. As we know, salt extracts moisture. So a lot of people salt all of their food before they, put it into a sous vide bath. But again, that's going to extract a lot more of the moisture. I salt afterwards. Number 4, I kind of already mentioned, but harmful chemicals, EA. I hope you're not asking me to pronounce any of these, but from the plastic will come. Now, if you're going to use the Dollar General store Ziploc bags, probably would not, all right, because I don't know anything about those and if they have the proper chemicals. But on here it talks about the FDA and the USDA confirms that plastic which is used in sous vide and cryovac do not contain any of the BPA or any of the chemicals that can be transferred into it, as well as Ziploc bags. And number 5, it's boil in a bag. We do not boil, ever, all right? It does not ever, you can set it to boil, and I think the highest temperature, I do cured lemons in a sous vide bath, and that gets 195 degrees Fahrenheit, but that's the highest, and it's only lemon peels. So other than that, I'm never really cooking at a very high level of temperature of water either way. So we're not boiling it in a bag. So that's one of the things that in his readings you'll hear about is probably one of his big pet peeves. So here, a couple of things. You'll see here 2 pieces of meat. This one is obviously cooked sous vide. You can tell why, because the color is fully through the whole product. Here, this was either pan-seared or put on a grill, probably pan-seared by the crust that we see there. But you'll see all that meat that's been exposed to those high temperatures. A saute pan, 500-600 degrees when it's on medium-high heat, that part of the meat is exposed to that high temperature of meat, and that's why it gets that color. So a lot of people will say, well, does sous vide meat have the Maillard reaction, which we all talk about the browning of protein, the amino acids and simple sugars in products. It does, because the temperature will create that reaction. So on the next one, I talk a little bit about sear before or after. It's kind of a personal preference. If you sear before, you are going to create a little bit more flavor that's going to be in the bag to circulate through the product. But it doesn't have that crispness that people associate with steaks or duck breasts or anything like that. So it comes to the fact of how do you want to present it, you know? Like you see now in, cooked chickens upside down, so all the juices drip down into the breast after in an oven. So I say to a student, if you're cooking for a customer, they want to see a really good chicken breast. So you have to cook it the traditional way. So if you cook it upside down, it's going to be soggy. If you're at home cooking for yourself, do you care what it looks like? No, because you want all the moisture in there. It's the same with sous vide. If you take it out of a bag and it's medium rare, the steak looks not edible because it doesn't have that sear because we're used to seeing it. Can I sit down and eat it that way? Absolutely. It's a texture difference because I don't have that sear on it. So that's usually why I'll sous vide and cook it 5 to 8 degrees lower than I want to serve it. After I take it out of the pan, I pan sear it really fast, really high heat. In fact, if you have a deep fryer, that works better. Actually drop it in a deep fryer for 30 seconds. And you're probably like, well, I don't have a deep fryer. Then just sear it in an oven just to get that brown, okay, as well. So we've talked about a lot of this, all right. And I've only showed one. Yeah, no, two. That's another one you could click on about why the sous vide. I'm not going to bore you with that because we're starting to run out of time. I want to give a chance for questions. Up here, time of service. This is a great one as well because everything can be timed out. And the best example is eggs. Sous vide eggs for poached are probably the easiest thing I've ever done when it comes to sous vide. You take the egg, you drop it into the sous vide bath, or better yet, put it in a Ziploc bag and then put water, and this is a key because a lot of times when you read about it online, it doesn't talk about this. You put the water from the sous vide bath in the Ziploc bag with the eggs in the Ziploc bag. So students come in and they try to sous vide eggs to do a poached egg, and they'll put them in the poly bag or the Ziploc bag, and they drop them in. Well, they try to float and everything like that. You want to actually submerge the whole thing and get the water in around the eggs. That's really important. So here's, and again, we're going to have this online for you next week, the time and temperature, what it takes. And it's foolproof. And once it reaches this temperature, you'll see all the different consistencies of what you're looking for a sous vide egg. The only other tip I would give you if you want to do this is when you take it out of the shell, put it over a slotted spoon so that any of the white membrane that hasn't really coagulated together can drop off, and then you would put it on a salad or anything like that. So this is, but it's a time thing. So if I know I have brunch that starts at 11 o'clock, I know at 10:15 I got to put my eggs in to start serving them, and then put them in every 15 minutes after that. And you write right on the poly bag what time I put them in so I know what batch has to come out next. And you've got your sous vide for your Sunday brunch or whatever it might be. You take them out every 15 minutes, put them on the Eggs Benedict, and send them out. These are some tips from me, from reading, personally doing some things on here, and so on. Some I've talked about, some I haven't, but that's why I put them up here. Sous vide bath. Make sure that you cover it to prevent water from evaporating. So when I'm cooking, for example, my pastrami, and it takes 2 days to cook it, because the water starts to evaporate, you'll see that it'll go below the line of the immersion circulator. So here they use ping pong balls, and they put it on top of it. And also that's a visual that I can see that the water is circulating through it. You can cover it with plastic wrap, but sometimes the plastic wrap touches the water and then falls in. Nowadays they're creating Lexans and Cambros that have a cutout here in the top part of it so that you can cover it. And again, this isn't a HACCP thing. This isn't anything that you have to do, but it prevents the water from going down. That way, if I'm leaving it overnight, I come back tomorrow, it's not down below, because then what's going to happen is water's not going to be going through the coils and your motor burns out. And $600-700 isn't something you can just easily throw away. Metal clips I talked about as far as clipping it on the side. And again, you don't want to put like 8 with 1. You just want 1. All right? Oil for proteins. When I sous vide or cryovac a protein, if I've cut it into a portion to serve, when I cryovac it and I remove all the oxygen out of it, sometimes it'll conform because of the pressure of taking out all the oxygen out of the bag. So if you put a little bit of oil in there, it helps to create a barrier because there's no water in it, and it doesn't make that product cringe up a little bit. So if you just put a little bit of oil. It doesn't take much, but you're not going to ruin your product by that because, again, oil is just a heat conductor, so it's not really going to change anything with that. Keep items whole. The more you can do them larger, the better off they are, especially with vegetables, too. Vegetables are great sous vide. Carrots, I've done squash with it, just butternut squash. You put some butter in it, put it in there after you cryovac it, you leave it for an hour, you come back, you mash it, and it's done. So, and you can keep it bigger. You don't have to, spend time cutting it really small. But it does actually like a little bit larger of a piece because, again, we're heating it up all the way to the core. Don't overcrowd, and that goes with the first one. Lower, longer for chlorophyll. Chlorophyll doesn't like temperature, as we all know. So if you're going to do asparagus, green beans, something like that, have the temperature lower and go a little bit longer. But longer isn't always better. Some proteins don't like that, especially when I get down here. But I put lamb and grass-fed proteins and any wild game. And I can't remember the name of what's in blood for wild game, but I did elk one time sous vide. And I remembered after I did it, but that Chef Young talked about there is an enzyme in the blood that it doesn't make it bad to eat or anything. It just gives it a hint of a liver taste. You know how when you cook liver and it has that taste? That's what will be present in it. And it's the same with grass-fed and lamb. Anything extended that you cook for a long period of time will have a little bit of that taste. So you want to avoid if you can. So that's where you might say, well, the corn-fed beef is maybe a little bit better for this. But again, it depends on how long you're going to cook it. Pan-sear versus pre-sear versus post-sear. And again, that's a personal preference as far as what you're going to do, how you're going to serve it, and so on. But I really think, to me, afterwards, to have that crispiness. And then the other one is just be careful. A lot of times when you go through the length of time, like for example, I had a student one time in another class come to me and say, Chef, I sous vide these chicken legs for 2 hours at 165. And then I grilled them, but why are they dry? Well, you grilled them afterwards. And he's like, well, I only grilled them for about 10 minutes. Well, why did you sous vide them then? And he's like, because I wanted to cook it. You already cooked it. So why are you grilling it? Oh. So, again, they take the knowledge of this and think that they're doing something to help it. But, again, you're cooking it to keep the moisture in, to keep it at a low temperature. So sometimes combining some of these cooking methods aren't really what you want to do. And I talked about that. And these here are just some resources that in my research and doing up here, you want to call it a works cited page, you can as well. The FDA regulations as far as it goes for that. The Polyscience Modernist Cuisine is where I got a lot of it from. Again, that's the one who taught my class for it and so on. So these are all links that you'll be able to go on. But again, if you just go to the cafe website next week, this will be there. Once Mary gets back and has a chance to put it up there. But this, to me, is, for us, the biggest resource. Why? Because our students have liked this page. They follow it on Facebook. They post all these different things. And it has probably the most awesome wide variety of modernist stuff that you can find on there. So you're probably, if you're a geek like me, you spend a lot of time on here because it gives you ideas and, oh, I can do this. And like this apartment rub, like I never would have thought in 100 years to take onions and burn them jet black, as dark as you can get them, and garlic and shallots, and you burn them and you puree them into a powder and you make this rub. And it's like, oh, really? And it's amazing. And things that I wouldn't really think of, they've done on here. So shaving a friend, I think that's supposed to be a joke, but
No, they actually do it.
do they?
Yeah.
Do they?
Right after they sharpen
Sharpen a knife?
They shave his arm too. They
Yeah.
step in the guy's
Th-
arm.
this is a guy, Grant, who's, I guess, one of my top guys or girls that I admire as far as culinary. And, like, to sit in a class with him, I go back to what it's like when we teach students when they sit down at, 18 years old and they've never cooked before, and you're talking to them. That's how he talks to me, because I feel like I know nothing about food. When, I've been doing it my entire life, but he just is like this, talks about a mushroom, and he can go on for 30 minutes about one mushroom, and you're like, I just thought it was gramini, and he's gone on for 30 minutes about everything about it. So, but they do liquid nitrogen on here, and I'm not going to steal the thunder. There's another one on modern that I'm actually going to sit on as well. You doing that one? Excellent. And I think it is the way, and I don't want to say it's the way of the future, because cooking is not going to go anywhere, what we've always learned. And I'll end by just saying this. We have to take what we think we know and accept that our industry could change. And I think a lot of us didn't think our industry was going to change. And Grant sat the first time I ever met him, I should say chef, young Chris, and he said to us, I was sitting where you were, and he said, describe to me how to make a stock. And we went on, and I'm not going to bore you with the whole process. And he said, all right. He says, well, why do you have to cook it for 6-8 hours? We all gave the educated answers. So you're pulling out all the extraction. You're taking all of the essence of the bones out of the liquid. And he says, well, why don't you grind up the bones? And we're all like, what? And he's like, why don't you grind up the bones? If everything you want is in the inside, if you grind it, all of it will be exposed. And we're like, all right. He has a little point there. Why do you cut your vegetables, 1-inch cubes? Well, it's because you don't want them to dissolve, because it makes it cloudy, the stock, and, the normal answer that you were taught, I was taught, we teach. And he says, well, that's not true. Well, what do you mean? He says, you guys rapidly cool your stocks, and it's the gelatin that's suspended in the stock that makes it cloudy. Because you think you have to, they couldn't even take in the full 6 hours to do it. You want to do it in an hour. And that's what makes it cloudy. And we're like, so what if I took the vegetable and cut it in half? What would that do to my cooking time? We're like, cut it in half. Well, what if I cut it in half again and made it a quarter? Okay, we feel like idiots. So, he's like, well, he would take a mandolin and he would shave all of his vegetables. And he took ground chicken bones and he put it in a pressure cooker. And in 35 minutes had a crystal clear stock that had more flavor than the ones we cooked in our soup, stocks, and sauces class. And it's not that we're doing it wrong in stocks. This is just a different way to look at it. And I think sous vide is a perfect example of that. It's just a different way of cooking. And I hate the term modernist cuisine and molecular gastronomy and all. We're still cooking. At the end of the day, we're still taking food and transforming it so that people can enjoy it. So, any questions? I kind of went fast. I thought it was only going to be like 30 minutes, but apparently I went.
Have you ever been to Dave Arnold's blog, or podcast, I'm sorry?
No.
He was at, I think, when it was the French Culinary Institute. Isn't it now the International Culinary?
In New York?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, he was kind of the director of, like, I don't know, molecular gastronomy. He's really out there. He's not even a chef. He's a really, really bright guy. David Arnold.
Arnold. I got to remember that.
Now he's got a bar, and he does a lot of this type of thing, too.
With drinks?
Crazy drinks.
Well, that's Chris Young. He sits down and he tells you, I never wanted to cook. He has a science background. So he looks at food, and that's how I've changed my methodology of how I teach and how I look at food, because he does it from a science, differently.
Harvard has a series too.
Yeah, I've signed up.
Not something that students want to watch because it's 1 or 2 hours, but it is really worthwhile watching.
Yeah, I've signed up. There's some coming up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, if you're to incorporate this in curriculum, what do you use a textbook or is it just what you come up with?
I don't. How I do it is I do both. Like, because our textbook and we teach a traditional, and we say you have to learn the basic. How many restaurants really use this? I come from Miami where they have the money to invest in all this sort of stuff in restaurants. I do contrast. Like, I'll bring it in, and the day I teach New World cuisine and we're grilling, I'll also bring in a steak and sous vide. And then I'll have them taste the difference and see the difference. So I wouldn't say that we specifically teach, because I don't think there's enough curriculum out there being written. There is, to read and to make it, but we haven't fully incorporated. I know anybody from the Culinary Institute here? Yeah, we do. Yeah, I was going to say, you guys have, I think, 3 classes, 2 or 3, they have at their school where students will take. So I think as I think curriculums change, they're just, of course, ahead of us and everyone else. So bravo to you guys. But I think it's good because this is what they want. But as I go back to what I said, they're going to come in with, multidextrin, and you're like, well, what do you plan to do with it? Well, I don't know. I got it on that, what is it?
Oh, molecular,
One of them,
evolution or something.
you get a packet of everything in it. They don't even know how to do any of it. It's one of those. I think it's great because you can do all the cool things, the airs and foams and whatever it might be. But I think we bring it in as extra when I teach a class or one of our other instructors to show them. So that's where we're going with it right now.